to talk to you tonight about the World War II letters that Mr. Husted wrote to his students, his former students at Whitfield School. And you know, I've talked about Whitfield so many times and how special it was to all of us that attended the school. You remember our only president from Michigan was Gerald Ford, and he himself was a veteran, and he signed into federal law Veterans Day would be observed on from November 11th from now on, from the time he was the president. So tomorrow is Veterans Day, and that's really why we planned this tonight, so that we will be close to Veterans Day. So it's a day to reflect with solemn pride on the heroism of those who died in our country's service. Let's stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with our flag, our city flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I want to point out the uniform that we have. This belonged to Carol McCune's father. He was in World War II. He served, and this is a real authentic World War II uniform that he wore. And Carol told me that he passed away this past January. He was 2 months away from being 101. Isn't that's an accomplishment. So wasn't that wonderful? So this is a real uniform from World War II. So I think that's what I meant to put up there. So a veteran is someone, whether they're in active duty, discharged, retired, or reserved. Oh, and I want someone to take a picture of all the veterans that are here at some point. Okay. It is someone who at one point in his life wrote a blank check payable to the United States of America for the amount of up to and including his life. That's an honor. When they join, they say, you have my life for the next 4 years, possibly. And not all of them came home, as we know. So, and I'm so pleased that our city still recognizes our veterans. We do it at Memorial Day for the parade, and then in November. And we can thank Kathy Robbins, Greg Miller, and Jim Smith for doing that and for putting this up again this year for our veterans in the park. And all the veterans received a sign with their own name on it to put in their yard to say that they served, which was wonderful. Well, this is Mr. Glenn Husted, and he was the superintendent and the principal of Whitfield School for 20 years. And he was there when Sharon, my friend from just down the street on Inverness, we've been through everything together. Anyway, Mr. Husted started writing to the men in World War II. And this is what his daughter says about him. Oh, let me find my notes. She says, I guess I would have to say my dad loved teaching. He enjoyed making a difference in children's lives and watching them grow with experiences. Daniel Whitfield School and Sylvan Lake were such an intermingled entities that he often thought of them as just one. Every day, teaching was a different experience, and he learned as much as the kids did. He enjoyed the lifetime friendship of the students and their families, and was pleased to have continued relationships with many of them long after their school days were over. I think he thought of the Whitfield kids as part of his family. And Whitfield School gave Dad, her father, the flag that had flown over the school for years, and it flew over their house until it disintegrated. And she said he got a little weepy that day. So this picture, this is our school, and some of you may not have even remembered that because it was already gone. They tore it down in 2003, which was sad. But this is a different picture than I've shown before. And the street sign says Ward Road and Orchard Lake Road. And it looks to me like Orchard Lake Road is still a gravel road. So this is a long time ago. And the kids that lived in Ward's Orchard, which is across from Sylvan Lake, on the other side of Orchard Lake Road, they would come to this corner and there would be a crossing guard to help them cross Orchard Lake Road. And it wasn't always safe. So here's Mr. Husted in the kindergarten room. This is the room that, where the painting was, the Mary Had a Little Lamb painting, which, who knows where that is now? I've told you. At City Hall, and go see the picture. It's just charming. It's just beautiful. So, this is Mr. Husted's daughter, Sherry. Sherry was 5 years older than I am, and she would even babysit with my sister and I when we were young. But she was full of life, and we reconnected in like 2003, I think it was. And then she would send me all these stories of things about her friends and what they had done growing up here. And it was really lots of fun to hear those stories. And then one day she found this file folder with the World War II letters. This is the actual authentic one. And there were numbers across the top, but he changed it to letters. So each folder is a different letter, going from A to Z. So this is where the letters were contained. So when she found them, she called me and told me she was going to send them to me. And it was her idea that we should return the letters to the original writers of those letters. So I thought, oh my goodness, there were about 70 letters. So did I tell you that I sat down and read each one of them? And then I started scanning them. So they are all on my computer. But so I said, how are we going to find these people? Most of them had already passed away. So I put something on Facebook, good old Facebook. And Randy Rogers responded. He had been a student at Whitfield too. Isn't that amazing? And he was in the service at the time. He was stationed in Seoul, Korea. So our emails went back and forth constantly, many times a day sometimes. He was an interrogator in the service, and so he knew how to find people. It was amazing. It really was. So, yeah, just be careful. So, one day we got a knock on the door, and there was Randy, and he came to see us. He was here back in Michigan, and I think he's back in the States now, but he was in Seoul, Korea. Most of the time we were finding these people. And, we would sometimes get close, and then that wouldn't be the right one, but he was right on 99% of the time. He was fantastic. So, now, Mr. Husted had to go to Whitfield School to type the letters up, because they didn't have a typewriter at home. This was in the 40s, remember. So this is an old typewriter. Maybe nobody would even remember even an electric one, maybe. Yes, well, do you know what this machine is? A mimeograph, yes. That machine is what made the copies. You would see where the black drum is? You would put your copy on that, and then the paper would go through, like you'd have to wind it up. You put each one through the machine. And even when I started teaching in the 60s, we used that. That's all we had. We didn't have any copy machines. We didn't have a computer, anything. But I wanted you to see what that looked like. So this is the first letter that Mr. Husted wrote to the boys and a few girls. This one is dated November the 6th, 1943. And he says, "Dear Joe, don't throw this away until I explain. Your name may not be Joe, but from now on, you are going to be one of the Joe Whitfields. that I have been trying unsuccessfully to maintain correspondence with. We used to see you around here quite frequently, some of you nearly every day, and over a period of about 9 years. Remember, Whitfield went through 8th grade at that time. So counting kindergarten, it would be 9 years. Anyone who has come to be as well known as we know each other at school does not fade from my memory just because he happens to be out of sight for a time. Every day, as I look over the students who are here at Whitfield now, I think of you fellows who used to be here, and I find myself wishing for some of the things that perhaps you too wish for. If you could have time from your more important duties to spend on wishing. It is frugal, of course, for me to hope to have you back for any more math classes, but I would like to repeat some of the other things we used to enjoy. And I left the copies over there, but they are legal size. He wrote 3 pages of legal size letters every time he wrote a letter to them. This I'll show you after. Anyway, then the second one, so then I want to tell you though, after he sent this letter out, and I do not know how he got the addresses of all the men, but he did. And it seems to me that when you were sending a letter to someone in the service, maybe you know that you didn't have to pay postage. Was that true? Does anybody? But maybe I'm just dreaming that up. Anyway, so then, is that true? You did not have to pay postage.
In 1956, we had an APO box, which stood for Army Postal. Right. You just had to address it, and it went through to the wherever.
Oh, and then they would find the address for the person.
Well, I mean, we had to have, I mean, it was an address. We had an address, but the postage.
Oh.
You didn't have to buy, and if it would have been, it would have been a 1 cent stamp back in those days.
Right, that's true.
Courtesy, you know.
The APO is their address.
Oh, yes, that's true.
And the services take it from there and get it to the right.
Oh,
post.
so it might take a while. Yeah, okay. So then the men would write back to him and say, I'm in Italy, I'm flying a plane, or I'm in Japan, or I'm in the Pacific, wherever they were, because they all knew each other so well, they wanted to know where their friends were serving and what they were doing. So the next letter, it says, this is in September of 1944. Oh, and it starts out that he tells about school starting, and because it was September, and he's talking about the service squad and the safety patrol, and the boys would have been in the safety patrol, of course. And they would have known Joe Levy and Paul Snyder and Frida Dawson and Evelyn Welch, though was a new student, and Joan Manning. They were all neighbors of ours, so I knew them too. So I guess I didn't copy all the ones. So then the third, oops, maybe I just put up 2 of them. But one of the things that they did at school also was to sell war bonds. And you won't believe how much they sold. In one day, in 1944, they sold $1,066.80 in one day at the school for war bonds. They were like, does anybody ever have one? My aunt used to buy them for us and give them as gifts because it would be like a savings plan. You paid, say, $12, but if you waited 5 years, you got $25. So it was really a good deal. They don't do it anymore, I don't think. But if that was today, it would be almost $13,000 in one day that they sold at the school. So you can see how the people were behind the people in the service. And these are the teachers' names. So the teachers probably collected the money and turned it into the office, and then they kept track. So, and we even have pictures of some of them as little children at Whitfield. I can't really point them out, and that's in 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grade. And here they are in 7th and 8th grade, ready to go on to junior high. So you can see how they've changed. So I'm going to start now with telling you about the letters. Here is Fred Beadle. At the time at first he was still living. I think he has passed away now. It says, "We have been studying a long time, and last month I took my final exam for second class petty officer. I was notified yesterday that I made it. It pays me $96 a month, which isn't so bad. I plan to come home this Christmas or New Year's, but it is impossible for me now, and I will probably have to wait until next June or July." This one is from Sergeant Wilbur Cook. He says, "Everything is going along fine here in Italy. I'm in the best of health and enjoy my work as much as can be expected under the present conditions. I'm glad to see that you had the traditional potluck at the end of your Friday night games. I'm sure all of us old-timers always look forward to it, but we sure didn't like to see the end of our weekly basketball games. I think I may have told you before that some of the boys, at least one boy every Friday night, would go to Mr. Husted's house, ring the doorbell, he'd come to the door, the boys wanted to play basketball. He gave them the key to the school. And they walked over to school and they played basketball all evening. Wasn't that wonderful? Oh, I just can't imagine. Anyway, the next one, this is Bob Cox. Bob Cox lived across the street from us our whole time we've lived here, although he's passed away now. But his mother would take a picture of every serviceman before he shipped out. So they're over there on the table. There are many, many pictures of a man all dressed in his uniform, ready to ship out, and she has him stand by the front door and take his picture, which is wonderful. It's where Chuck and Medea Pfeffer live on the corner of Benvenue and Garland in that cute little house. So I still have Bob's original letter because Bob didn't have any descendants. So I want to read this to you because to me it's priceless. It shows what they had to do to be trained. And of course we live in Mr. Husted's house. I think I've told you that over and over. So they knew each other really well, Mr. Husted and Bob Cox. I mean, it was like a son to him, probably. This is May 9th, 1943. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Husted, last week was the toughest week I have had yet. I will try to tell you briefly what we did. Monday, we worked on fixed bridges, which are bridges that are built across ravines. Tuesday morning, we had a conditioning exercises and orientation lecture. In the afternoon, we had movies on identification of airplanes. Wednesday at 6 a.m., we started on our 30-mile hike with full field packs. We arrived at the destination, the Colorado River, at 6 p.m. About 10 fellows dropped out, but I made the hike without any blisters. My feet were sore, but not like the majority of the boys. We pitched our tents and went to bed. Thursday, we built our platoon bridge 3/4 of the way across the river, which is 400 feet at the point, and then took the bridge down. After mess that night at 8 p.m., we started building the bridge in the dark. About 1 a.m. in the morning, a storm came up and we had to stop work on the bridge. Friday morning, we tore the bridge down, and in the afternoon, we built a ferry raft across the river. Saturday morning, we had a full field inspection, and in the field, the inspection didn't come up to their standards, so they restricted our passes for the weekend. Today, Sunday, I had to stand a bunk inspection before I could leave the company area. I haven't been able to weigh myself since I have been in the Army, but I believe I have gained a few pounds. I know that the fat fellows all have lost some weight. I haven't heard or seen much about Texas, but it isn't flat around here, and the country doesn't seem to be desert-like. Where the hills are, there are usually covered with pines. I wasn't able to obtain any clusters of pines this week. I think they are yellow pine or red pine, if there is such a kind. I have seen the scissor-tailed flycatcher, and they sure do have a long tail. The officers won't let us go swimming in the river because the river has a current of 6 to 7 miles per hour. About half of the company doesn't know how to swim. I have the credit of being the first to be knocked off the bridge. I was knocked off at night. I was lucky I wasn't hit on the head by the timber I was helping carry. If it was someone who wasn't able to swim, I believe they would have drowned. I lost my glasses, and then I fell in the water. I have no glasses. A fellow from the 147th Engineering Group was drowned in the river about 3 weeks ago. Besides this, I had my wallet and $20 stolen last week. Merry Christmas, Bob. I guess that's the way it is with training. You build it up, and then you take it down so you can build it up again. Oh, I think that would be discouraging. But anyway, and I wanted to point out in this picture, you'll see Mr. Husted's right hand. Mr. Husted had polio as a child, and his right arm was withered, and he could only type with his left hand. So that's another thing, those 3 pages of legal-size paper that he was typing to send, you can just feel the love that he had for them. So here's Bob Dixon's letter. I'm glad that the bond selling was a success. Keep up the good work. I'm afraid that after this is all over, people are going to need the bonds and any other form of cash. I can't help but think there are some rough days ahead. Well, keep up, did I already read this? No, I guess not. Well, keep up the good games, and one of these days we'll all come down and have a couple of games just for old time's sake. Another 1.5 to 2 years, and we will see the fellows rolling home to stay. That is with a little luck. Bye for now, Bob. And I wanted to show you this one. That you can see that this letter had, all of the letters were censored. You see the circle on the left, or the square on the left. That shows that somebody had read this letter and censored it to make sure that they weren't sending.
There's an APO up there, 88, too.
Oh, yes. And see, May 12th, 1944. U.S. Army, yes. Thank you, Greg. So all of the letters had to be censored, had to be read, because our family would receive letters and sometimes things would be blackened out that they couldn't say and send home. So, and this one is Chuck Dreyer. He said, this is from 1943. Received your letter a few days ago and thought it was swell. It's real novel. I get a kick out of reading about all the fellas in the village we used to know. I hope that someday all of us that can will have a get-together at Daniel Whitfield School. I get letters now and then from Bob Cox and Ronnie Kimmler. You probably have guessed by now, my pride and joy is a B-24. And that was a bomber. Okay, this one's, Sharon, do you remember Bob? Bob Earl lived next door to me. I might say that he was my first boyfriend. I was only 5 when the war ended, but seeing him in his uniform, oh, he was so handsome. Yeah, you had some competition, Pete.
Look at Pete's face.
Yeah. Anyway. I even have a picture of Bob standing in front of our house on Inverness in my baby book. That's how special he was. And I think I told you that, pardon?
So you're digging a hole.
I'm digging a hole. I should be quiet. Okay. Oh, You know, it was just wonderful where we lived. Okay, this is a good one. I have been razzed a lot about being a Boy Scout, but I don't mind. I know my officer called me one day and asked if I was a scout, as I could do certain things that others couldn't. He told me he was an Eagle Scout, and he was proud of it. So you can see it set the fellas back a slight bit. I'm training to be a driver. We have to make maps, which I had learned a little bit about while in Troop 27. And now I'm very glad I went as far as I did in scouting. So you never know where you're going to get some training. Oh, this is an interesting one. This is from Proctor Coates. Proctor Coates was 40 years old, and he was called by I heard by the president, but by somebody in importance, to come and help. You can picture a foxhole, one here and one here. And they used to have men running from one foxhole to another to give directions or send a note or whatever. They had to communicate with each other. Well, often that runner was killed because he was out in the open. So they called Proctor Coates to come and see if he could figure out a way to correct that situation so they could communicate without leaving the foxhole. And he did. I think it was similar to using the can like we had with the string, but it worked. Whatever he did worked. So that was wonderful. But this is really a cute story. And Mr. Husted and Proctor Coates would have known each other because they were about the same age. It says, say, Glenn, pass word to Mike Myers to get a hold of Harold, his son, and tell him to keep his mother home Thursday evening between 8:30 and 9:30 by hook or by crook, if you get this by Thursday. Will you tell Mary Lou, their daughter, the same thing for insurance? It's our 21st wedding anniversary on April 22nd, and I want to call her on the phone. I hope I don't get all choked up and can't talk. I really couldn't sing in church Sunday, but I felt a whole lot better afterwards. It doesn't seem possible that I'm on my 4th week already. 6 months will soon roll by, and then I'll be eligible for captaincy. I sure will work hard anyway, but it is so nice to feel that you are making progress. I hope everything is fine with you, and thanks again, Proctor. Isn't that sweet that he worked for the telephone company. That's why they called him, because they figured that he would know how to figure out something for the foxhole situation. So he had 2 sons. The oldest one is Harold. He is on the right hand. Oh no, I don't have the right picture up yet. Harold was older, and so he went in the service after high school. And so then Jim came along, and actually what happened, the mother decided to go and live where the father was serving and working on this experiment, and left Jim home alone. Well, he had to find somebody to live with. He had to call up his friends, can I come and live at your house for 6 months or this school year or whatever? And he was able to do it, but I just can't imagine. And Jim is just, I'm not positive Jim is still living, but he was the most wonderful man. So anyway, when it came time for Jim to go in the service, he asked his mother if you had to have permission if you were under 18 or I don't know what the date was by the year, but you had to have permission. And his mother said, no, I'm not going to lose my husband and my son, 2 sons. No, you can't go. So then he wrote to his father, and his father said, yes, you can. So he did enlist, and he did fly. He's in the back seat of this plane, right there. And then when they got home, the father wanted all 3 of them to have their picture taken together in their uniforms. So Jim is on the left, and the father is in the middle, and Proctor and Harold on the right-hand side. All handsome guys. Okay, this is from Gene Levy. He lived on Avondale, right across the street from the Weidemans, in that one of those brick houses there. He said, "Mr. Husted, once again I am writing to thank you for the form letter you sent to me, and this time accompanied by the Christmas program. If you only knew how much pleasure is derived from reading about the activities of your old schoolmates, you would have the presses running 24 hours a day." And then in 1944, the village, we were still a village of Sylvan Lake, decided to send a Christmas card to every one of these people in the service. This is the front of the card. And these are the men on the Veterans Committee. Sharon, you might recognize some of those. And in fact, the farmers is where Ruth's house is. That's where Ruth lives. I'd have to look at the other ones. Anyway, so this, and then this is the message that was part of the card, and I'm going to read part of that to you because I know it's too small to read. And then they sent these 6 pictures because they wanted to know what was happening at home. But one of the pictures, they said, it's a mystery. We want to see if you might guess where it is. One of the pictures that has changed from when they had left. Remember what happened in the 40s down at Ferndale Beach? It was all swamp. There were 5 canals. It was all brush. It was not livable, and Mr. Weideman had the idea to fill that in for our park. So the one in the middle, I think, no, this one is the one on the bottom left is the one that used to be, it was all swamp before. But they would recognize the other ones. The one on the top left are the teachers at Whitfield School. They would have had all those teachers. The one, you know where this is? The boat club. Where is this one? No, not the one on the left, the middle and the left. Yes, that was the camp. That's what the camp looked like in the 40s. And this, I think, is along Lakeview, because you can see the point. And that's Ferndale Park, and this is City Hall. So I'm sure they enjoyed those pictures. And then this was the message. We are so proud and grateful for what you have done that we want to express our appreciation in some way. We could think of no better way than to help you secure all service benefits and reestablish yourself in civilian life when you get back home. So after much careful thought, a World War II Veterans Committee was formed to look out for your interests in every possible way. So when they got home, they knew that they would have someone to help them get back into civilian life. Oh, this is a cute story. When we found the letters and I found someone in the family to come and get them at my house, they would come to our house, and it was just a joy to watch them. They would sit and read the letter. I'd give them time just to read, not talk to them or anything. Well, these 2 ladies came to the door, and 2 sisters, and to pick up their dad's letters. And they brought a little picture of the house that their father had grown up in. And I didn't have that one in the history stuff. So I said, can I run upstairs and scan this? And they could sit there and read the letters. So I did, and I'm upstairs, and all of a sudden, I hear them giggling, and they're laughing. And I thought, what's so funny in these letters? Well, as it turns out, their father was writing about his girlfriend, and they never thought of their parents being girlfriend and boyfriend. Isn't that cute? And they did get married. He was talking about buying a ring, and when they got home, they were going to get married, and they did, and these are 2 of their daughters. I thought that was so sweet. So you can see that their father did send a lot of things to Mr. Husted. And then some of them, there were 6 or 7 that were still living, and these are some of them. And Pete and I had the pleasure of going out for lunch with them actually twice. Marvin Hole on the left actually stayed 1 year longer in Germany to help rebuild a town over there after the war was over, the one on the left. And Jerry Stoll was not in the service with them, but he was one of their special friends. And Jerry Stoll, oh no, that's Jim Coates is one I told you about, staying with different people. And Lyle Filkins grew up right here too, in Sylvan Lake. Actually, right across from you, Mary, in that brick house that has the apartment upstairs. So they were able to identify a lot of school pictures and just a lot of things that, and share stories about what they did in the service. Oh, and this is one funny story. Several boys were drawing a map of South America on the floor of the gym. They needed more room and decided to move the piano. The gym floor was linoleum, and the piano casters had embedded themselves in the linoleum. So a little shove, and the piano fell over. The boys were scared. They ran to the office for Mr. Husted, and Mr. Husted raced down to the gym. He was more concerned about the boys than the piano. So, but there's several letters that talk about the piano. And this is Lyle Filkins. He says, "Your last communique certainly had a lot of news I've been wanting to hear. Gosh, you must have a whale of a bookkeeping job to keep everyone tagged. Your files are just about complete, it seems. Nearly everyone is overseas or pretty close to it. I'm still laughing about that piano moving episode." So, and this is Marvin Hole. He said, "Here's hoping this letter finds you in good health, and also Mrs. Husted and Sherry. I received your letter about a month ago, and I feel like a heel for not answering before this. I certainly enjoyed your letter with the news of the village and all the fellows, and I was surprised that you still remember the time Johnny and I upset that piano." And this is Howard Sturdy. He says, "I received your swell letter today and enjoyed reading it. I let the fellows in my crew read it. They thought it was swell of you to write a letter like that and wish someone they know would write that same kind of letter to them. When you get some more time, I sure would like to hear from you again." And this is a letter from Raymond Lloyd Taylor. "I have my plane now. Even now, I am on my last lap, so to speak. We will finish up here around the 5th of June, and then from then on, it's anybody's guess. Yesterday, we dropped our first bombs and scored 12 hits out of 13 bombs, which isn't too bad for the first try. The B-29 sure is a swell ship to fly. I like it better all the time." And this one is a different one. This one's interesting. Well, I've been in the Army 3 weeks, in the camp a week and a half. 1,000 of us from colleges, and theoretically, we will be sent back after 13 weeks or so. Those of us who are still living, after 1 week from our barracks, 60 of 60, there are 3 in the hospital. 1 somewhere is mentally incompetent at the time. I'm surprised that there aren't more in the same boat. Boy, in 1 week, they gave us a better mental and physical beating than I've ever come close to before. But they say the first 3 weeks are the worst. We got one of them packed away. And Ed Vaughn he was taken out of college to go and be trained, and he did end up being a doctor. So that's why his service was a little different. Okay, a couple more. Oops. Mike Steer, he lived next door to Mr. Husted. He said, "After the preliminaries were completed, we moved out on the forward area to await the time when we would participate in the pre-invasion day bombardment. At dawn on the scheduled day, we approached the island of Hiroshima along with other units of the fleet and opened fire with our heavy guns. Incidentally, the Nevada had the honor of firing the first shot. This preliminary shelling lasted for several days, and we were proud and pleased to see that we were effectively knocking out Jap installations, such as pillboxes, blockhouses, and anti-aircraft gun placements. We have no idea of the number of Japs we killed, but we did see several go down under our own fire. And this is Bob Gitson's Christmas card. You can see all forms of service are represented here. And this is a letter from Gary Schroeder. He lived on Glenwood. It certainly sounds good to hear the way the villagers are behind the home front war effort. It helps the morale of the soldiers from the village a lot. I hope they keep up the good work. I know they will. We are all hoping for a speedy victory and return home. Speaking of those Friday night game periods, Mr. Husted, it reminds me of the last furlough I had, and I dropped in and looked old times over. Sure wish I could be there to participate in those basketball games. And this is in front of Mrs. Cox's house, how she took a picture of most of the men who went in the service. It says, after spending the last 7 months of the 76th Division, I have finally decided to try to become an air cadet in the glorified Air Corps. They have lowered the requirements, both physical and mental, and I think and hope I can make it. To get in, I need 3 letters of recommendation. I'd be very grateful if you could write one for me. Thank you very much. So, this picture was taken in front. The house on the right is actually the house where we live. And the house on the left is where the Tolts used to live, and that's where the Arrowwoods live now. But that's the house that Chet Hall lived in. And then Mike Steer lived on the house on the other side. So these men, as soon as they got home, the first thing they wanted to do was go buy a new car. And so Chet Hall bought a convertible. You can see. They're all standing in front of their cars. They're so proud of the fact that they could do that. Isn't that neat? Okay, and then, this is another thing the village did. This was the first sign that was put up to list all the men in the service down at Memorial Park. This was even before it was a park. It was just an empty lot, probably. But they also collected, I want to show you something. They also collected tin cans because tin cans were really tin, and they needed the metal for the war effort. So in order to collect a whole bunch of them, here, Greg, what you would do is you would take a tin can, you take both ends out, you put both ends in the middle, and can you guess? Stamp on it.
You want me to do that now?
Yes. I want them to see.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Easy packing.
So they would collect this by the ton. They collected it both there at Memorial Park and at the school. And then they would take it to a recycling place, the beginning of recycling. But we did that with all the tin cans all the time I was growing up. So then they built this beautiful new sign, and this lists all the servicemen in alphabetical order. And that was at Memorial Park as well, which was very, very nice. And now we have the sign that was put up yesterday or the day before. Another thing that the village did was victory gardens. At that time, there were lots of empty lots. And so people would, the farmers were called into the service, and so they couldn't be working their fields. Plus, they couldn't get gas. Gas was rationed. You had a ration book. You only got so much per month, and so they couldn't drive back and forth. Plus, so then everybody decided they had to grow their own food. So wherever there was an empty lot, they would divide it up for the neighbors to each, like we're doing back here now. which John Farms has started back here with the garden. So they would all grow something different so they could share with each other. And that's how they got by with fresh vegetables for the duration of the war. But there were several around Sylvan Lake, which was really neat. This is from one of the men sent him a little booklet that showed this picture. And you can just imagine him wanting to read the news from home. And this is a USO dance that they used to have. And the Red Cross would have these, where they'd invite girls to come in and dance with the men and have a good time. So, do you have any questions about Greg?
I saw a picture there when one of the men was Mr. Dawson.
Yeah.
The Dawsons, the two men that are.
Yes.
They had the houses just down on.
Yes, John Dawson is one of the men, and there was a letter, and I did take it to them, and he was in the service. John Dawson, not the one where the two new houses are, but the ranch-style brick house is where John Dawson lived. And yes, he was one of the servicemen. So, yeah, he was in the Navy, along with Greg. Okay.
Where were the USO locations?
Well, I went to a dance in the 60s, I think, and it was at Selfridge Air Force Base. But I don't know other than that where they might have been. Just some big ballroom, maybe, or they usually were on bases, I think, the dances.
The USO was still operating. I went in 1955, and they still had that at the military bases.
Oh, it was right on the base.
Yeah, with entertainment and something to do on your off time, besides KP and guard duty.
Right.
It was an important function. They served a very good purpose.
Yes. So you can see how important it is to keep up with friends and family and even notes to people now. We use email a lot, but there's nothing like a handwritten letter to say, how are you? I appreciate you. You've been my friend, whatever the situation is. Jim?
No, ma'am, I was practicing my writing.
Oh, okay. Any other questions?
So I was just gonna say that my mom collected tin and also rubber when she was just in, I don't know, early high school, I think. She was in New Jersey at the time, but that was a big thing to do. That everybody, like you said, she told me about the rationing and then the gathering it up for the war effort, and everybody was united behind it. It was the community was involved in supporting the troops in that way.
Yes, right.
War effort, yeah.
Yes, since I was born in '39, so the war started actually in Europe that year. But as a baby, my feet would grow, and my mother would trade stamps, sugar stamps, with a neighbor, so she could buy me shoes, because they didn't, you couldn't keep up with a growing baby, to have enough stamps, ration stamps, things like that. So.
I can remember food being rationed and you couldn't get butter. So my parents used to buy something, whatever it was, I don't know, and it would have an orange block in it. And you remember those?
Yes.
Squeeze it, so it would look like butter.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what it was. I'm sure it wasn't healthy, but it served the purpose.
But you can see how people helped each other. And that is happening over and over in Sylvan Lake. It continues, that love for each other.
I just say that mail call was a very important part of someone in the military. And we didn't have mailboxes. You didn't have an address. You were part of a unit. So when the mail came in, and it wasn't every day, but when it did, the company clerk would, we had a PA box in every barrack. Mail call, mail call. Everybody would run out in a big crowd, and the PA or the company clerk is calling off the names not alphabetical, but the names. And call out your name, you ran up, you got your letter and walked away. And when he finished calling out, everyone standing around thought, well, maybe tomorrow or the next day. And that was a very important
Yes,
for morale.
that's right. And that's what Mr. Husted was really aiming at, keeping these fellows in touch with each other, because they were such good friends. They just all grew up right close to each other, so, and went to school together all that time. So I think it's such a wonderful story to share what Mr. Husted did for all these service people and for the city of Sylvan Lake, and we've continued that on today, and I'm very pleased that that's happening. So, any other questions? What time is it? Oh, good.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This being the final.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, now there's one more request. This is from the Historical Society. Does anybody know where our museum is? Good, good. It's at the corner of Long Lake and Orchard Lake Roads. It's a little white building.
Is it called the West Bloomfield Historical?
Well, it's Greater West Bloomfield Historical Society, and it includes Sylvan Lake. We are included in their in that organization, and they are looking for volunteers. And I have some more papers over like this over on the table, and they are going to have a training session on Wednesday, December the 7th, to help you learn how to be a docent or a guide in the museum. And it's just fascinating. The museum has been redone. It is beautiful inside. You will be impressed. And as soon as they get our Sylvan Lake sign up there, I want to have all of you come over there, and we'll have a session at the museum, because they've really done a beautiful job in getting it all fixed up. So if you can volunteer one Sunday a month, that's what they need, is someone to be there at the museum while visitors come in. And it's really a neat place. So if anybody would think about that, I'm hoping that that you might think about doing that, because it is fun and you learn something. So anyway, thank you so much for coming. It's delightful to see you. And I want to get a picture of all the people that have been in the service.